to Deep Sleep Stories. If these stories have helped you through restless nights, please leave a review. Reviews are what help this podcast grow, reach more listeners, and stay alive. Without them, even something meaningful can slowly disappear. So if this show has brought you comfort, that small act truly helps keep it going. Now, settle in, and let's begin.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, a quiet place where your mind can soften and your body can rest. And tonight, you'll drift into a gentle tale about a small fishing hut beside still water, warm with lamplight and whispering reeds. You are here now, exactly where you need to be. And there is nothing to solve, nothing to hold up, nothing that needs to be carried for even a little while. Let your shoulders loosen as if they are remembering how to be heavy in the kindest way. Let your jaw unclench. Let your tongue rest. And if your eyes are open, allow them to grow comfortable with closing, as though the lids are soft curtains easing shut. Breathe in slowly as if you could sip the air like warm tea, unhurried and mild. And breathe out as though you are fogging a window, letting the day blur into a gentle haze. Another easy breath in and another slow breath out, releasing the last little knots of tension that may still be tucked between your ribs or behind your eyes. Imagine, just for this moment, that the world has turned down its volume. The sharp corners are padded. The bright lights are dimmed. Sounds arrive from a distance, softened by air and time. Somewhere far away, a door closes. Somewhere even farther, a wind moves through branches. Everything close to you becomes quiet, and everything quiet becomes safe. And now, with your breathing slow and steady, you begin to sense a place that is both simple and strangely comforting. A sleepy fishing hut at the edge of a lake, where moonlight rests on water and a lantern glows like a small, steady star. In a little while, you won't need to be inside the story at all. You can simply listen as if you are listening to rain. You can let the story carry itself like a boat that knows the way across familiar water. And so, without effort, the view shifts gently, and you become an unseen, cozy witness to someone else's quiet evening by the lake. On a shoreline that curved like the edge of a cupped hand, there stood a fishing hut made of weathered wood and patient repairs. It was not a grand building, not the kind of place that announced itself. It simply belonged there, the way a smooth stone belongs in a stream bed, the way a nest belongs in a forked branch. The hut's boards had faded to the color of driftwood and soft ash. In places, moss had taken hold, not like an invasion, but like a blanket tucked over a sleeping shoulder. The roof sloped gently, shingled in old cedar that gave off a faint, comforting scent when the air warmed. A narrow porch leaned out over the water, supported by stout posts that had stood through seasons of ice and thaw, through storms and summers, through silence and song. The lake itself was calm, dark as ink, with a surface so smooth it seemed to hold the sky the way a mirror holds a face. Moonlight lay across it in a pale ribbon, drifting and shimmering, and every so often a ripple would lift that ribbon and fold it, then lay it down again. Reeds gathered along the shallows, whispering to one another, their thin leaves tapping softly in the night breeze. Somewhere a frog called once, then settled again into stillness, as if it too was ready for sleep. A narrow path wound through the trees to reach the hut. It was a simple path, pressed into the earth by quiet footsteps and the steady traffic of small creatures. Pine needles cushioned it. Ferns leaned close, their fronds like slow green hands. The air smelled of damp soil and bark, of lake water and wild herbs, of night itself, cool and clean. Along that path, at an unhurried pace, walked a person named Elowen. Elowen was not in a rush. There was nothing urgent in her stride, nothing sharp in her posture. She moved as if she was part of the evening rather than someone passing through it. She carried a small pack over one shoulder, and in her hand she held a lantern, unlit for now, swinging gently with each step. Her boots made almost no sound on the pine needles. The forest accepted her quietly. It recognized her in the way familiar places recognize those who treat them kindly. Elowen had been away for a time, days perhaps or longer. But the hut was an old friend. It had kept its shape. It had kept its scent of cedar and smoke and lake air. It had waited without impatience. As she reached the final bend in the path, the hut appeared between the trees, and the lake opened up beyond it like a dark bowl filled with starlight. Elowen paused as if to let the sight settle into her. Her breath rose in a faint cloud. The night was cool, but not biting. It was the kind of cool that invites blankets and warm drinks. The kind that makes lamplight feel like a small miracle. She stepped onto the hut's porch, and the boards responded with a gentle creak, a familiar little voice. Elowen smiled softly. She set her pack down near the door and ran her fingers along the porch railing, feeling the rough grain, the tiny ridges and smooth patches worn by years of hands. The door opened with a sigh. Inside, the hut was cozy and close, shaped by use and care. A small table sat near the window that faced the lake, and a chair with a woven seat waited beside it. Shelves lined one wall, holding jars of hooks and twine, a kettle, a tin of tea, a few worn books with softened spines. Nets were draped neatly on pegs, and a fishing rod leaned in a corner, its line coiled patiently as if it had learned the art of waiting. In the center of the hut was a little stove, round-bellied and sturdy, with a pile of kindling stacked beside it. The air held the faintest trace of smoke from past evenings. And something else too, something like calm, like memory, like the peaceful residue of all the quiet moments that had gathered here. Elowen set her lantern on the table, then struck a match. The flame bloomed briefly bright, then steadied. She touched it to the lantern wick, and a warm glow rose, soft and honey-colored. Shadows shifted and settled. The hut became a pocket of light in the wide, dark world. Outside, the lake continued its slow breathing. Inside, Elowen began the gentle ritual of arriving. She unrolled a small blanket and laid it on the bed, tucked into the far corner. The bed was narrow but welcoming, covered with quilts in muted colors, deep green, faded blue, a little patchwork of brown and cream. The quilts had been stitched with patient hands, and they held warmth the way earth holds warmth after sunset. She opened her pack and took out a few simple things: a tin cup, a small loaf of bread wrapped in cloth, a wedge of cheese, and a bundle of dried herbs tied with string. She set them on the table with unhurried care, as if arranging an offering. Then she turned her attention to the stove. She placed kindling and small sticks inside, building a little nest of wood. She struck another match, and the flame caught. It danced, small and eager, then settled into a steady, contented burn. Soon the stove began to tick quietly as it warmed, the metal expanding with soft sounds like distant footsteps. Elowen sat in the chair by the window and watched the lake. The lantern light behind her made a faint reflection in the glass, a second little glow floating over the dark water. She could see the moon's reflection too, pale and round, wobbling slightly whenever the water shifted. Stars scattered themselves across the surface, and it was hard to tell where sky ended and lake began. She breathed slowly, and her shoulders dropped another fraction, as if they had finally received permission to rest. There was in this place a kind of gentle magic that didn't sparkle or shout. It was not the sort of magic that demanded attention. It was the quiet magic of being sheltered while the world remained wide. It was the magic of a lamp lit on a dark shore, of warm hands around a cup, of the soft hush that comes when nature decides to be still. Elowen rose and filled the kettle with lake water from a clay pitcher she kept inside. The pitcher was cool to the touch, damp with condensation. She set the kettle on the stove and listened as it began to heat. The faintest whisper at first, then a growing murmur, like a secret being told. While the water warmed, she opened one of the worn books from the shelf. Its pages were thick and slightly yellowed, and the edges were soft from being turned many times. It was a book of lake lore and quiet tales. Stories about fishermen who spoke to the wind, about reeds that remembered songs, about moonlit nights when the water seemed to hum. But Elowen did not read right away. She simply held the book open and let her eyes rest on the lines without urgency, letting the shapes of the words become soothing patterns. Outside, an owl glided silently between trees. Somewhere, a small animal rustled in the undergrowth, then went still. The world was settling into its nighttime rhythm, each creature taking its place in the dark, like a note in a lullaby. When the kettle finally sang a soft, high note, Elowen set the book aside. She poured the hot water into her tin cup and added the dried herbs, something floral and sweet, something calming. The scent rose gently, wrapping the air in a warm, herbal softness. She brought the cup to her lips and sipped slowly. The tea warmed her from the inside out. It made her chest feel looser, her thoughts less insistent. It made the hut feel even more like a nest. After a while, Elowen stood and opened the door to the porch. Cool air slipped in, fresh and damp, carrying the scent of water and reeds. She stepped outside, holding her cup in both hands. The porch boards were chilly under her boots, and the night air kissed her cheeks. The lake stretched out before her, quiet and dark. The moon had climbed a little higher, and its light made a silver path across the water, a shining road that seemed to lead somewhere gentle and far away. Elowen leaned on the railing and listened. At first it seemed like there was no sound at all, only silence. But the longer she listened, the more she heard. The faint lap of water against the posts, the whisper of reeds, the distant sigh of wind through treetops. It was as if the lake was speaking in a language made of softness. She took another sip of tea and let her thoughts drift. Elowen had come to the hut for a reason that was hard to name. It was not because she needed to catch fish, though the hut was built for that. It was not because she was hungry or lost. It was because sometimes the mind grows crowded like a room filled with too many chairs. Sometimes the days pile up like stones in a pocket. And sometimes the only way to empty that pocket is to come to a place that knows how to be quiet. This hut knew. It had watched the lake through misty mornings and golden afternoons. It had felt the tremble of storms and the long hush of snow. It had held laughter and murmured conversations, and it had also held deep, restorative silence. Elowen finished her tea and stood a while longer, letting the cool air smooth her skin, letting the night comb through her hair. She felt herself becoming lighter, not in the sense of floating away, but in the sense of being less burdened. When she returned inside, the hut welcomed her back with warm air and lamplight. She latched the door gently and hung her coat on a hook. The stove glowed faintly. The lantern flame flickered softly, steady as a heartbeat. Elowen ate a simple meal, bread and cheese, slowly, mindfully. Each bite was small, each chew unhurried. She drank a little water. She wiped the table with a cloth. Everything she did was done with a kind of quiet respect, as if she was not only caring for the hut, but also caring for her own tiredness. After cleaning up, she turned back to the window. The view was different now. The moonlight was deeper, more luminous. The lake looked like velvet. The trees along the shore were dark silhouettes, their shapes softened by darkness. It was beautiful in a way that made the chest ache gently, not with sadness, but with tenderness. Elowen sat again, and this time she opened the book and read. The story she found was about a fisherman long ago who built a hut on a lake that was said to be asleep. Not dead, not empty, only sleeping, like a creature curled up beneath the surface. The fisherman would come each evening and speak softly to the water, thanking it for its calm, asking it to keep its dreams gentle. In return, the lake would send him small gifts, a fish that shimmered like moonlight, a feather that fell onto his porch, a smooth stone warmed by the sun. Sometimes it would send something stranger, a feeling of being watched kindly, a sense of safety so deep it made his knees weaken with relief. Aloan read the words, and they felt like they belonged to this place. The lake outside her window seemed to listen. The reeds leaned in. As the story continued, it spoke of a particular night when the fisherman fell asleep in his chair, the book still open in his lap. In his sleep, he dreamed of stepping out onto the lake as if it were solid ground. He walked along the moonlit path of reflection, each step soft and soundless. Under his feet, the water did not break. It held him gently like a hand. In the dream, he reached the center of the lake, where the moon's reflection was brightest. There he saw a shape beneath the surface, a great, slow-moving creature made of darkness and shimmering light. It was the lake's dream, or perhaps the lake itself. It opened one eye, and its gaze was calm and ancient. It did not speak in words. It spoke in feeling. Rest, it seemed to say. Let the water carry what is heavy. Let the night hold what is tired. Eloan's eyes moved across the page, but her breathing grew slower. The story was like a cradle rocking. The hut was warm. The stove's gentle ticking became a lullaby. Outside, the lake remained still, as if it too was drifting toward deeper sleep. Eloan closed the book and set it aside. She rubbed her hands together, feeling the warmth in her palms, and then she reached for a small bundle on the shelf, a fishing line and a hook, simple tools that had been used by many hands. She did not plan to fish tonight. Instead, she stepped outside again and sat on the porch, letting the cool air greet her. She held the line loosely, letting the hook dangle over the water. It glinted faintly in moonlight. The hook touched the surface, and the lake accepted it without fuss. A tiny circle of ripples spread outward, then faded. Eloan let the line rest there, not as a trap, not as a demand, but as a gentle connection between herself and the water. She breathed, slow and steady. In the quiet, she began to notice small details, the way the reeds shifted like sleepy dancers, the way the moonlight made the porch boards look pale, the way the water reflected not only the sky, but also the lantern glow from inside, creating a faint, warm shimmer near the hut. She noticed, too, that the lake had a scent, subtle but distinct. It smelled of minerals and moss, of deep places, of cool shadows. It smelled like the inside of a shell. Eloan's thoughts drifted like leaves on water. They came, and then they moved on. She did not chase them. She did not argue with them. She let them float away into the dark. After a while, the line trembled faintly. Not a tug, not a bite, just a soft vibration, as if the lake had breathed out. Eloan smiled, though no one saw. She lifted the hook gently from the water, and as it rose, a bead of water clung to it, catching the moonlight. The bead looked like a tiny pearl, a small round world. It quivered, then fell back into the lake with the softest plink. It was nothing, and yet it felt like a message. Elowen set the line aside and leaned back in her chair. She let her head rest against the porch wall. Her eyes grew heavy. The night air cooled her skin just enough to make the warmth inside feel even cozier. And then, in the hush between sounds, something else arrived. It was not a voice, not exactly. It was more like a presence, like the feeling of someone kind standing nearby without needing anything from you. The lake's stillness seemed to deepen, as if it had turned its attention toward the hut. Elowen did not feel afraid. She felt held. The lantern inside flickered softly, and its light spilled onto the porch in a warm rectangle. The lake reflected it faintly. The world seemed to be made of two gentle halves, warm light and cool dark, both soothing in their own way. Elowen stood and went back inside. She latched the door, stirred the stove once, and checked that everything was safe and settled. Then she blew out the lantern, leaving only the stove's faint glow. In the dimness, the hut became even more restful. Shadows softened into one another. The bed in the corner looked like a quiet cave of quilts and pillows. Elowen undressed slowly, folding her clothes neatly. She slipped into the bed, and the quilts welcomed her with gentle weight. They smelled faintly of cedar and clean fabric, of sun and smoke and time. She lay on her back for a moment, hands resting on her stomach, and listened. The hut made small sounds as it cooled and settled. The stove ticked. Outside, the lake lapped softly at the posts. The reeds whispered. Somewhere, a night insect sang a thin, steady note. Elowen turned onto her side and pulled the quilt higher. Her eyelids fluttered. Her breath slowed. As sleep began to gather around her, she found herself thinking of the story from the book, the fisherman walking on the lake's moonlit path, the great dreaming creature beneath the surface. She imagined that the lake outside was indeed sleeping, curled up under the moonlight, and that the hut was its little guardian, its cozy companion. In her mind, she saw the lake's dream as a slow, glowing movement under dark water. She saw it breathing deep and calm. She saw it exhaling. And with each exhale, the world grew softer. Elowen's thoughts grew less clear, more like shapes in mist. She drifted. And in that drifting, the lake seemed to offer her something. Not a fish, not a feather, not a stone. It offered her a simple, deep permission. Permission to rest. Permission to let go. Permission to do nothing at all. The hut held her in its small wooden arms. The quilts pressed down gently, like a reassuring hand. The sounds outside became distant, as if they were happening in another world, or in a dream. Elowen's breathing became slow and even. Her face relaxed. The muscles in her neck loosened. Her mind, which had carried so many thoughts, began to empty like a bowl, being gently rinsed. Outside, the moon kept watch. Pale and calm, the lake shimmered faintly. The reeds swayed. The trees stood still. Time moved slowly, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that soothed. Minutes passed like soft waves. At some point, Elowen's dreams began. In her dream, she was standing on the porch again. The lantern inside glowed warmly, but the light was softer than usual, as if the air itself had turned velvety. The lake was perfectly still, more like glass than water. She stepped down from the porch, and instead of sinking into mud or water, her foot landed on something firm and gentle. The lake held her. The surface felt cool and smooth, like polished stone warmed by moonlight. She walked slowly, her steps soundless, following the silver path of moon reflection. The farther she went, the more the world around her seemed to fade, leaving only water and sky and the soft glow of the moon. When she reached the center, she looked down. Beneath the surface, the great dreaming shape moved, slow and graceful. It was not frightening. It was enormous, but it felt gentle, like a whale drifting through deep water. Its edges shimmered faintly, as if stars were caught in its skin. One eye opened, and it looked up at her. In that gaze, Elowen felt a calm so deep, it was almost physical, like sinking into warm sand. She felt the lake's patience, its quiet strength, its endless willingness to hold and release. Then the eye closed again, and the shape continued to drift, dreaming peacefully beneath her feet. Elowen stood there for a moment longer, letting the calm soak into her bones. Then she turned and walked back along the silver path toward the hut, toward warmth and quilts, toward rest. When she reached the porch, the door was open, and inside the bed waited like a small nest. Elowen climbed into it, even in the dream, and the quilts wrapped around her. The lake's whisper became a lullaby. The moonlight became a blanket, and the dream softened, fading into deeper sleep. The hut remained steady through the night, quiet as a held breath. The stove's glow dimmed and brightened gently as the embers shifted. The air inside stayed warm enough, the kind of warmth that keeps you safe without waking you. Elowen slept deeply. Outside, the lake continued its slow, restful breathing. Small ripples came and went. A fish turned somewhere beneath the surface, and the water sighed around it. The reeds swayed, then grew still again. The trees held the night in their branches. The moon moved gradually across the sky, and the silver path on the water shifted with it, sliding softly from one place to another, like a ribbon being gently drawn across velvet. Nothing hurried, nothing demanded. Everything simply was. And in that quiet being, the world felt kind. Now the story begins to slow, like a boat gliding into still water. The air grows softer, the sounds grow quieter, the lake settles even more deeply into its dreaming. Elowen remains asleep in the fishing hut, wrapped in quilts, breathing slow and calm. Her face is peaceful, her hands are relaxed, her mind is far away, floating in gentle dreams. The hut holds steady, The porch waits. The lantern is dark. The stove is only a faint warmth now, like the last glow of sunset lingering in the wood. Outside, the reeds barely move. The moonlight is pale and quiet. The lake is smooth, almost motionless. Everything is easing downward, down into softness, down into rest, down into sleep. And you listening can let your own breath follow that same gentle path. In and out, slow and easy. No effort, no need to think. Just the steady rhythm of resting. The fishing hut stays by the water, cozy and safe, like a small secret of warmth in the wide night. The lake keeps dreaming. The world stays quiet. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.